Morning sun filtered softly through gauzy curtains, casting long golden stripes across the quiet bedroom. Eleanor Brant lay still beneath her hand-stitched quilt, the same one she'd sewn piece by piece during sleepless nights while her children cried in rooms down the hall, waiting for answers she didn't have. Her hands, once calloused from decades of cleaning, cooking, working, now rested peacefully atop her chest, one palm still clutching the frayed edge of a photo tucked under her pillow. She was gone. No gasps, no struggle. Just the silence of a woman who had finally laid down the weight of her sacrifices and closed her eyes for the last time. By noon, the news had reached the Brant children. Victoria was the first to arrive, dressed in a tailored black coat and boots with heels too high for a gravel driveway. She barely glanced at the peeling paint of the front porch as she stepped over a dying potted plant and let herself in. The air was heavy with dust and time. She really let this place go, she muttered, setting her designer bag on the same sideboard that once held birthday cards and school permission slips. An hour later, Daniel's rented sedan crunched up the drive. He stepped out in an old bomber jacket, sunglasses hiding bloodshot eyes that weren't from crying. He didn't knock either, just walked in and exhaled a long, tired breath. Then came Lila, last, as always. She parked her weathered car under the oak tree and sat inside for several minutes before moving. Her fingers trembled as she gripped the steering wheel, staring at the house that had been both sanctuary and cage. Finally, she stepped out, clutching a faded tote bag and her mother's old keys. The house hadn't changed, and that unsettled them more than anything. They didn't speak much that first evening. Grief wasn't something they wore well, not for their mother, not after the years of distance and half-hearted check-ins. They wandered the house like cautious ghosts, each drawn to old corners and memories they didn't want to acknowledge. Victoria walked through the living room with sterile detachment, running her fingers along dusty mantels and scoffing at the floral wallpaper Eleanor never replaced. This could all be renovated and flipped, she mused aloud. Split the proceeds, if we're smart. Daniel was already eyeing the land out back, the plot with rumors of shale and mineral rights. You think she ever got it surveyed? He asked, his tone too casual for the topic. There's money in that dirt. Lila lingered in the kitchen, staring at a chipped ceramic mug left on the counter. The last cup Eleanor had used. It was still damp inside. There was a lipstick mark on the rim. She stared until her throat closed up, and she turned away quickly, brushing tears before anyone could see. No one spoke about funeral arrangements. No one brought flowers. It was assumed, without question, that the will had already been drafted, signed, and filed. Eleanor was many things, stubborn, frugal, old-fashioned, but she was never careless. They had always believed she'd be organized even in death, but none of them expected to feel so cold. On the second night, they opened a bottle of wine in the living room, a poor attempt at nostalgia. They tried remembering something warm about their mother, some shared laugh, some silly story. But silence filled the gaps. And in that silence lived unspoken resentments, debts unpaid, and wounds covered with years of distance. She never really knew how to show love, Victoria said finally, swirling her glass. She showed up every damn day, Lila whispered, voice tight. Yeah, Daniel muttered, and still managed to make us feel like we were never enough. None of them noticed the sealed envelope sitting inside the drawer of Eleanor's nightstand upstairs, or the journal beneath the loose floorboard behind the dresser, or the key taped to the bottom of a porcelain angel on the windowsill. Eleanor Brant was gone. But her goodbye had only just begun. The lawyer's office was colder than expected, not in temperature, but in atmosphere. The walls were sterile beige, lined with faded certificates, and the ticking of a slow wall clock gnawed at the silence like a metronome of dread. Victoria sat straight-backed in her seat, legs crossed, tapping the tip of her pen on a legal pad. Daniel slouched in his chair beside her, arms folded across his chest, eyes scanning the ceiling as if the tiles might offer distraction. Lila sat a seat apart, her gaze fixed on the floor, hands clenched in her lap. Across from them sat Mr. Calhoun, their mother's longtime attorney, a thin, weathered man whose sad eyes had seen the aftermath of far too many fractured families. "Thank you all for coming," he said softly, opening a large manila envelope and sliding the contents onto the polished oak desk. Eleanor was meticulous with her affairs. There's no confusion about her intentions. This is her most recent will, updated less than 6 months ago. Victoria's brow lifted. 6 months? She echoed. That's surprisingly recent. She knew what she was doing, Mr. Calhoun said. Daniel scoffed. Right, always 5 steps ahead. Calhoun ignored the jab and began reading. The will opened with the usual formalities. Eleanor's full name, date, and the declaration of sound mind. Then came brief notes. Bequeathing her modest collection of jewelry to Lila, her first edition books to Victoria, her late husband's old tool chest to Daniel. Then came the shift. And to the entirety of my estate, including the house at 43 Sycamore Lane, the surrounding land, bank accounts, stocks, and any and all residual assets. The room held its breath. I leave to Jonas Hale. Silence. A full 3 seconds passed before Victoria blinked. Excuse me? Daniel sat up. Who the hell is Jonas Hale, mister? Calhoun looked up, almost cautiously. I'm afraid I can't answer that. Your mother was very specific. She provided no explanation. Just the name. All contact information she left is in this envelope. Lila's voice cracked through the stunned air. This has to be a mistake. It's not, Mr. Calhoun said gently. Your mother was clear. I confirmed her signature, her state of mind. This was notarized in my presence. Is this some con artist? Victoria hissed, now fully upright, cheeks flushed. Did someone take advantage of her? Manipulate her while she was vulnerable? I assure you, Miss Brant, your mother was neither confused nor coerced. She was firm, intentional, and very private. Daniel grabbed the copy of the will and scanned it furiously, flipping pages like he might find a loophole. This doesn't make sense. We're her children. We're her family. Who the hell is this Jonas guy? Calhoun folded his hands. I was instructed to deliver the remaining documents directly to Mr. Hale, along with a private letter. I don't have the legal authority to share the contents with you. Victoria stood. We'll contest it. You're within your rights, Calhoun said calmly. But I warn you, she anticipated that too. She left behind additional documentation. Records, notes. She knew we'd be angry, Lila whispered, more to herself than the room. Daniel stared at the edge of the desk, jaw tight. So she knew what this would do to us, and still did it anyway. Mr. Calhoun nodded slowly. Yes, she did. The siblings left the office with shaking hands and boiling blood. Victoria called their father's old accountant before she even reached her car. Daniel lit a cigarette he hadn't touched in 3 years. Lila sat in the back seat of Victoria's SUV in stunned silence, her fingers still curled around a single phrase echoing in her mind. Jonas Hale. Back at the house, they stormed through rooms, looking for answers. There were none. Only dust, fading photos, and the quiet smugness of a mother who had outwitted them even in death. But later that night, when they finally sat around the kitchen table, something deeper than anger began to take hold. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about him. Who was Jonas Hale? And why, after everything Eleanor Brant had endured, was he the one she chose? Rain fell in slow soaking sheets over 43 Sycamore Lane, tapping softly against the cracked window panes. Inside the Brant house, the air was thick, with unease, with silence, and with a name none of them could get out of their heads. Jonas Hale. Victoria stood by the living room fireplace, holding the will like it was a bomb that hadn't finished exploding. She hadn't slept. Her makeup was smeared under her eyes, her tailored blouse wrinkled, but her voice remained sharp, focused. We need to find out who he is. Now. Daniel was hunched over the dining room table, surrounded by his laptop, old family albums, and a half-finished whiskey. I've run a background search. There are 4 Jonas Hales in the state, 1 in town. All the records are either redacted, sealed, or vague as hell. It's like he doesn't exist. Lila stood at the kitchen sink, watching the rain trace paths down the window. Maybe that's because he was never meant to be found, Victoria snapped. Don't start with the melodrama, Lila. We're not living in a ghost story. Lila turned slowly, her voice low but cutting. No? Then why is our mother's will reading like a mystery novel? Victoria sighed and pulled out her phone. Fine. I'll do what should have been done 2 days ago. She walked into the hallway and dialed a number from memory. The private investigator she had used during her divorce years ago. A woman named Marin, discreet and expensive. Marin, it's Victoria Brant. I need you to find someone. Within 5 minutes she'd given the name, the context, and a tight deadline. Discreetly, Victoria repeated, her voice as cold as the marble tiles beneath her heels. This stays between us. When she returned, Daniel had moved from his laptop to digging through their mother's old roll-top desk, its drawers stuffed with bills, letters, receipts, and expired coupons. None of this makes sense, he muttered, tossing aside a thick tax folder. She didn't even own a smartphone. You're telling me she somehow found a man none of us knew, rewrote her will for him, and left behind no explanation? Lila's eyes scanned the bookshelves in the study, then drifted toward a dusty wall cabinet their mother rarely opened. Something was tugging at her, not logic, but instinct. She did leave something, Lila whispered. We're just not looking in the right places, and she was right. In Eleanor's bedroom, tucked behind a loose drawer panel in the nightstand, Daniel found a narrow stack of faded envelopes wrapped in a silk ribbon. His breath hitched when he pulled them out. They were letters, 10 in total, each addressed in the same delicate, flowing script they remembered from grocery lists and birthday cards. Jonas Hale was written on every envelope. No return address. No stamps. Just his name. Daniel brought the bundle downstairs like it was radioactive. The siblings gathered around the table, staring at the letters like they might scream if touched. Lila was the first to reach out, hands trembling. Should we read them? They're not addressed to us, Victoria said quickly, though her eyes betrayed her curiosity. Oh, please, Daniel snorted. Since when have we respected privacy? He cracked the top letter open. The ink was smudged in places like Eleanor had wept while writing. Jonas, I don't know if you'll ever read this. Maybe I'm a coward for writing instead of calling. But words are all I have left, and there's so much I never told you. Not because I didn't want to, but because I was afraid you'd hate me. Daniel stopped, throat tight. Lila gently took the letter from him and continued reading aloud. I spent my life choosing silence when I should have screamed. I protected them, always, even from the truth, especially from the truth. But one day, they'll know everything. And when they do, I hope you can forgive me, not just for the past, but for what's coming. By the time Lila finished, the rain had stopped, but inside the house, something had broken open. There was no denying it anymore. Jonas Hale wasn't just a name. He was part of their mother's secret life, a chapter none of them had ever been allowed to read, until now. As Daniel slowly tied the ribbon back around the bundle, Victoria's phone buzzed on the table. A text from Marin lit up the screen. I found something. We need to talk. In person. The storm had passed, but inside the Brant house, the tension only thickened. The living room felt claustrophobic, heavy with the weight of Eleanor's absence and her lingering secrets. Victoria sat in front of the fireplace with the bundle of letters lying untouched on the coffee table. She hadn't opened another one since the first. Something in that letter, its honesty, its grief, had unnerved her, made her feel like a child again, caught in the shadow of a mother she never truly understood. Across the room, Daniel busied himself flipping through an old filing cabinet Eleanor had kept locked for years. The siblings had found the key taped inside the lid of a tea tin. Inside were folders, some labeled, some not, but all yellowed with age. Lila stood at the edge of the room, arms folded, watching her siblings scramble like ants over breadcrumbs. She felt hollow, disoriented. Nothing about this house, this family, or even her own childhood memories felt safe anymore. Daniel cursed under his breath. Bingo! He pulled out a thick file marked Insurance and Banking, 2019. But inside weren't policies or bank statements. There were forged signatures, photocopies of notarized forms, and transfer requests. Lila's brows furrowed. What is that? Daniel's voice lowered. It's our names, Her name, accounts being drained, savings moved into holding funds, authorizations that don't line up. Victoria stood quickly. Wait, what are you saying? I'm saying she didn't authorize half of this, Daniel said. Look at this withdrawal from her IRA. That's your signature as co-signer, Victoria. But the date's wrong. You were in Milan then, weren't you? Victoria froze. She must have signed it before I left. Except her handwriting isn't shaky like this. This is clean. Yours is cleaner. Lila stepped forward, voice quiet. We said it was just temporary, remember? Victoria and Daniel turned toward her slowly. She kept going. When we moved the money. After her fall. We told ourselves she didn't need that much sitting there. That we were protecting her. Keeping things running. Daniel swallowed hard. It wasn't just the accounts. The loan against the house? That was forged too. Victoria's voice turned sharp. We had no choice. She didn't understand what she had, or what she could lose. You remember the calls from the bank? She was 2 months behind on utilities. The roof needed replacing. The kitchen sink was leaking into the basement. Lila shook her head. So you drained her to protect her? It wasn't like that, Daniel snapped. We were trying to fix what she ignored. Were we? Lila asked. Or were we just taking? Silence fell over the room. Ugly, accusing, familiar. The truth had always lived beneath the surface. In glances avoided. In birthdays skipped. In their growing distance from the woman who once held all three of them together with fraying hands and tired smiles. We were planning to put her in a home, Victoria said suddenly. Daniel's head turned. You said you'd never bring that up. She's dead now. What does it matter? Lila's voice broke. You were going to send her away without telling me. You would have gotten in the way, Victoria snapped. You were always the soft one, the idealist. But someone had to make hard decisions. She was falling apart. She didn't want help. She didn't want us. She didn't want to be used, Lila said, voice trembling. Daniel slumped into the armchair, burying his face in his hands. She knew. Of course she did. That's why she left it all to Jonas. Victoria's expression hardened. No, she wanted to punish us. Don't turn her into a saint now. But her voice wavered, because buried beneath her anger was a deeper fear that Eleanor had known everything, that the woman they once believed to be blind and passive had been quietly gathering evidence, watching, waiting. And now she was speaking from the grave through pages and paper and whispers of a name that none of them could erase. Jonas Hale. I think she wanted justice, Lila said, but I also think she wanted us to finally see what we became. Victoria turned away. Daniel stood up. We need to find out how much she knew, what else she left behind. Lila nodded slowly, her voice small but certain. And we need to find out who Jonas really is, before he finds out everything about us. The house had begun to creak differently. It wasn't just age or weather or settling wood. There was a weight now, a watchful presence, as if Eleanor Brant herself lingered in the corners, her silence no longer quiet. The walls remembered. The floorboards whispered. And beneath them, something waited. It was Lila who heard it first. Late one night, long after Victoria and Daniel had retreated to their childhood rooms, Lila sat cross-legged on the bedroom floor, sorting through boxes of their mother's worn linens. The overhead light flickered, and in the hush that followed, she felt it. A subtle shift beneath her, a hollow thump where the floor should have been solid. She froze. Knocking once more with her knuckle, she heard the difference. A board just slightly out of place. Carefully she pried it up, and there, wrapped in a cracked leather belt and swaddled in yellowing muslin, was a thin, dark green journal. Her breath hitched as she untied it. The cover was soft, aged, and stamped with gold initials. E.B. She didn't wake her siblings. Not yet. Instead, she sat at Eleanor's old writing desk, turned on the reading lamp, and flipped to the first page. The handwriting was unmistakable. Long, looping strokes, full of pauses, cross-outs, underlined words that looked like Eleanor had fought with herself, to be honest. But it wasn't written in plain English. It was coded. Each sentence danced between metaphor and cipher, sentences written backward, odd symbols replacing letters, phrases so poetic they sounded like riddles. The bird with the broken wing never left the nest, but the children built ladders and left her behind. Names are like water, they change form when frozen in guilt. He lives in the shadow of the fire, he remembers. I never stopped watching. It was madness or brilliance, and it was clear Eleanor had written it only for herself, or for someone who already knew the code. Lila sat up all night deciphering what she could. Patterns emerged, initials disguised as flowers, dates hidden inside verses, mentions of the boy with two mothers, and repeated references to something called the Red Room. By dawn, she was shaking. She waited until Daniel stumbled into the kitchen, bleary-eyed and half-dressed. She slid the journal across the table. She knew, Lila said softly. She knew everything. Not just about the accounts, about Jonas, about something even deeper. Daniel flipped through the pages, eyes narrowing. What the hell is this? A warning. A confession. I'm not even sure yet. Victoria joined moments later, drawn by the tension. Her eyes landed on the journal. Where did that come from? Floorboard, Lila replied. She hid it. Victoria hesitated. Do you think Jonas has read this? Lila shook her head. I don't think even we were meant to. But it's ours now, and it's the only clue she left behind in her own hand. Daniel read aloud. I tried to love them into becoming better, but love turned to protection. Protection turned to silence, and silence let the rot grow roots. No one spoke for a long moment. Victoria finally pulled out her phone and tapped into her private messages. Marin got back to me. She has a location, Jonas Hale. Not just a name now, he's real, local. Lives under a different surname, but it's him. She's certain. Lila's head lifted sharply. Where? On the edge of Elm Hollow, near the old mill. Off-grid, mostly. She said he's reclusive, private. Doesn't answer the door unless he knows you. Daniel leaned forward. So what do we do? Confront him? Victoria shook her head. No, we go carefully. We watch first. Feel him out. We don't tell him anything. Not until we understand what he knows. Lila gently pulled the journal back toward her. This changes things. She wasn't passive, she wasn't senile, she was planning something. She just didn't live long enough to see it unfold. Daniel's eyes flicked to the floor. Unless she did. Victoria looked up sharply. What's that supposed to mean? Daniel shook his head. I don't know. But I'm starting to think her death wasn't as quiet as it seemed. The room fell still. Outside, the wind rustled through the trees like a whisper. The house, their childhood fortress, had become a puzzle box. And at the center of it all was a name their mother had written again and again, beneath coded lines of pain and protection. Jonas Hale. And now, they would find him. The key was old, heavy, and cold in Victoria's palm, its brass surface worn smooth by decades of use. She stared at it for a long moment before sliding it into the small safety deposit box at the bank's back office, the one their mother had insisted they keep hidden, untouched, until after her passing. The room smelled faintly of antiseptic and polished wood. Victoria's fingers trembled as she turned the lock and lifted the lid. Inside, nestled beneath layers of faded velvet, was a single object. A dusty VHS tape labeled in elegant cursive, "For when I'm gone." A lump rose in Victoria's throat. She glanced at her siblings. Daniel's jaw was tight. Lila's eyes shimmered with silent tears. None of them dared speak. The weight of their mother's final message hung between them like a fragile thread. Back at the house, they dusted off an old VHS player Eleanor had kept beneath a cabinet. Ancient technology in a world of streaming and downloads, but the only way to unlock the mystery inside. The screen flickered to life, and Eleanor's face appeared. The lines on her face were softer than in the photos, her eyes weary but steady, as if she were speaking directly to them, to all three, even from beyond the grave. "My dear children," her voice began, trembling but resolute. "If you're watching this, then I am no longer with you. I know this will come as a shock. More than that, a betrayal. But I ask you to listen with open hearts." Victoria swallowed hard, and Daniel leaned forward, hands clasped tightly. Lila wiped a tear from her cheek. Eleanor continued, "For years I kept secrets to protect you, secrets I thought would save us. But in the end, those secrets became chains, chains that bound us to pain, fear, and silence." She paused, swallowing hard. "There's a man? Jonas Hale? He is not a stranger, nor an enemy. He is part of this family, of this story, in ways you have not yet understood. He is someone I trusted with my truth, when I could no longer bear the weight alone." Victoria's heart pounded. "Who is he?" she whispered. Eleanor's eyes glistened with tears. "Jonas is my son, your brother." The room fell silent, heavier than before. Daniel's breath caught. "A brother? But how? Why?" Eleanor nodded, as if reading their questions aloud. "Before your father left, before life tore us apart, I was faced with a choice I never wanted to make. Jonas was born in a time of desperation and love, a love that was hidden, complicated, and broken." Her voice cracked. "I gave him away to protect him and to protect you, but he never stopped being my son." Victoria covered her mouth, unable to form words. Daniel ran a hand through his hair. Lila's fingers trembled as she clutched the remote. "There is more," Eleanor said. "Jonas holds the key to understanding everything. The estate, the letters, the pain. You must find him, not to fight, but to heal, to learn what I could not say." Her gaze softened, her face weary but determined. "I forgive you, my children. But now it's time for you to forgive yourselves." The tape ended, the screen going black. None of them moved. The truth, when it finally surfaced, was heavier than they'd ever imagined. Victoria whispered, "A brother we never knew." Daniel's voice was hoarse. No wonder she left everything to him. Lila's eyes were wide, a mix of shock and dawning hope. Maybe this is the chance to rebuild, to undo the damage. But beneath the fragile hope was a raw wound, decades of secrets, betrayals, and lies that would not be easily healed. As the siblings sat in the fading glow of the TV screen, one thing was clear: nothing would ever be the same again. And the search for Jonas Hale, the lost son, the mystery man, the key to their mother's final wish, had only just begun. The road to Elm Hollow was narrow and winding, flanked by towering pines that blocked out the afternoon sun. Victoria gripped the steering wheel with white-knuckled intensity as Daniel sat beside her, scanning the overgrown fields and broken fences that marked the outskirts of the forgotten town. Lila rode silently in the back seat, her eyes flicking between the dense forest and the cracked GPS screen. "This has to be the place," Daniel muttered, pointing to a weathered mailbox barely hanging onto its post. The name Hale was etched faintly into the metal, rust eating away at the edges. Victoria parked the car on a dirt driveway, kicking up clouds of dust. Ahead, a small, weather-beaten cabin sat half-hidden beneath twisted ivy and wild vines. The windows were darkened, curtains drawn tight as if shielding secrets from the world. "Are you sure this is him?" Lila asked, voice barely above a whisper. Victoria nodded. "Marin's been thorough. She tracked him here months ago. He's kept himself hidden, living off the grid. No phone, no social media, just gone." Daniel took a deep breath. "I don't like this. It feels like walking into a trap." "Then we proceed carefully," Victoria said, steeling herself as they approached the front door. She raised her hand and knocked sharply. A long silence followed. Then, from within, the door creaked open a few inches. A pair of sharp, wary eyes peered out, dark, guarded, and impossible to read. A man's voice, low and cautious, broke the stillness. "Who are you?" "We're family," Victoria answered, voice steady but careful. "We're here because of Eleanor." The man hesitated, then opened the door wider, stepping back to allow them inside. The cabin's interior was modest, sparse, a faded rug, a small wooden table, and shelves cluttered with books and old photographs. The air smelled of pine and earth, mixed with the faint scent of burning candles. Jonas Hale stood before them, tall, lean, with eyes that held shadows of pain and resilience. His face was unfamiliar, Yet there was something hauntingly familiar in the way he carried himself. "I don't know what you want," Jonas said, voice rough but composed. "And I don't want trouble." "We're not here to cause trouble," Lila said softly, stepping forward. "We want to understand. About you, about Mom, about everything she left behind." Jonas studied them silently before nodding. "She trusted you to find me, said I needed to know the truth. But the truth isn't simple." Victoria swallowed her impatience. "Then help us make sense of it, please," Jonas sighed, rubbing his temples. "I'm not the man your mother remembered, not anymore. I left that life behind, left the lies, the betrayals, and the family I never knew. But I kept her memory, and her pain." Daniel's eyes narrowed. "You expect us to believe that after all these years you're some wounded recluse with no answers?" Jonas met his gaze, unwavering. "I expect you to listen." He led them to a worn leather chair, gesturing for them to sit. For the first time, his walls began to crumble. "I was born from a love your mother never spoke of, a love that was dangerous, complicated. I was taken from her when I was just a baby, hidden away to protect me from the storm that tore her family apart." Victoria's throat tightened. "Why didn't she tell us?" "Because she feared what would happen if she did. She feared losing you all, and losing me again," Jonas said softly. Lila reached out, her hand hovering uncertainly before resting lightly on his arm. "What happened to you? Why did she hide you?" Jonas's eyes darkened. "Because there were people who wanted to keep me silent. People who would destroy anyone who got close to the truth." Daniel's voice was sharp. "Like who?" Jonas looked away. "That's a story for another time. But know this. Your mother sacrificed everything to keep me safe. And now the past is catching up." A heavy silence settled over the room as the siblings absorbed the weight of Jonas's words. Victoria finally spoke, voice barely steady. "What do you want from us?" Jonas met her eyes. "I want to know if there's still a family here worth fighting for, or if the past has already destroyed everything." The siblings exchanged uncertain glances. For years they had believed their mother was alone, that Jonas was a stranger. Now, faced with the man she loved in secret, the brother they never knew, the fragile threads of their family began to unravel, and the battle for truth and forgiveness had only just begun. The cabin's dim light flickered as the storm outside intensified, shadows dancing across the walls like ghosts of the past. Jonas sat by the small wooden table, Eleanor's journal open between his hands, while Victoria, Daniel, and Lila gathered close, their faces etched with exhaustion and anticipation. Jonas spoke softly, his voice heavy with emotion. "She wrote this for me. For all of us, really. Not just to expose secrets, but to explain why she did what she did." Victoria traced a finger along a faded passage. "I made a choice no mother should have to make. A choice to protect my children, even if it meant breaking them." "What does that mean?" Jonas swallowed hard. "It means she lived with a burden we never saw, a secret so heavy that it shattered her in silence." Daniel's brow furrowed. "We always thought she was just alone, forgotten. But she was fighting a war we never knew about." Lila nodded. "She mentioned the impossible choice several times." "What was it?" Jonas looked up, eyes haunted. "There was a man, not your father, who threatened everything she loved. Someone dangerous. When Jonas was born, Eleanor realized that if the truth came out, it would destroy all of them." Victoria's voice trembled. "So, she gave you away?" Jonas's expression broke. "Yes. She sent me away to safety, to a family who could protect me. But she never stopped loving me. Never stopped hoping we'd be reunited one day." He paused, fingers trembling over the worn pages. "She hid her pain behind strength, the financial struggles, the distance between you. It was all to shield you from the chaos." Daniel's voice was low, almost a whisper. "And yet, here we are, fractured, broken, angry. Did she think this would fix us?" Jonas shook his head. "No. She feared the damage might already be done. But she believed in forgiveness, in healing. That's why she left the letters, the journal, and even the tape. Victoria wiped away tears. All this time, we blamed each other. We never understood her. Lila's voice cracked. We never really knew her. The mother who loved quietly, who sacrificed everything without complaint. Jonas closed the journal gently. She wanted us to see beyond the anger, the greed, the mistakes, to find the family, beneath the pain. The siblings looked at one another, the years of resentment softening in the glow of newfound understanding. Victoria whispered, Maybe we still have a chance. Jonas smiled faintly. It won't be easy, but with her guidance, we can try. Outside, the storm began to calm, as if Eleanor's spirit was finally at peace. Her last words a bridge between a broken past and a hopeful future. The fire in Jonas's hearth crackled low, casting long, golden shadows that stretched across the room like reaching fingers. The four of them sat in silence. Jonas, Victoria, Daniel, and Lila. The journal closed, the VHS tape rewound, but still ringing in their minds. Eleanor's presence clung to every word, every silence, every unfinished sentence. I used to hate her, Daniel said finally, his voice thick, after Dad left. I blamed her for everything. For letting him go. For being weak. For not fighting harder. But I was the one who left her behind. Victoria looked over, startled by the rawness in his voice. I used her, he went on. I forged those bank forms, took money I told myself she didn't need. I even told my wife not to visit her too often, said it stressed her out. But really, it stressed me out, watching her fall apart. And I did nothing. Lila reached over and took his hand. He didn't pull away. Victoria sat stiffly, arms wrapped around herself. I didn't forge anything. Not directly. Her voice was hard, defensive. But I looked the other way when Daniel did. I justified everything. Told myself I was managing her affairs. Told myself she needed order, not sentiment. She looked at Jonas, her eyes shining. But maybe I didn't want to see her, not really, because seeing her meant facing the guilt, and I didn't want to feel guilty. Lila's voice came next, quiet as a confession. I thought I was the good one, the loyal one. I visited, I called, but even I gave up near the end. When she got quiet, I assumed it was age. I didn't see the pain. I didn't ask the right questions. I just let her fade. Jonas sat silently through it all, his face calm, but his eyes were full of something deeper. Grief without time, sorrow that had outlasted anger. You were children once, he said gently. She knew that. And she knew how life would change you. She forgave you, probably long before you forgave yourselves. Daniel shook his head. But that doesn't fix it. It doesn't bring her back. No, Jonas said. But it's not too late to become the people she believed you could be. Victoria stood abruptly, wiping her face with the back of her sleeve. Well, we have our truth. We know who Jonas is. We know why she did it. Now what? The will? The estate? She left it all to you. Jonas stood too, slowly. I haven't touched a penny. I wasn't ready. Victoria's eyes narrowed. And now? Jonas looked at the journal resting on the table. Now? Maybe I am. But just as the first flicker of peace began to settle, Daniel's phone buzzed on the table. He looked down. His face blanched. What is it? Lila asked. He turned the screen toward them. It was a breaking news alert. Local man found dead in apparent suicide. Disgraced financial broker, linked to forgery scandal. Victoria's voice dropped to a whisper. That's Peter, my ex-husband. Daniel read aloud, numb. Authorities found documents in his home tied to ongoing investigations of elder financial abuse. Anonymous tipster provided evidence late last night. Victoria staggered back a step. He was going to be exposed, and he knew it. Lila's mouth opened, then closed. You don't think? Jonas didn't move. His voice was even. I didn't contact the authorities. But someone did, Daniel said, and they had access to the records. The room turned toward the journal, then to each other. Eleanor hadn't just left them a will. She'd left them a loaded gun, aimed at the past, and someone had pulled the trigger. One of them. And then came the final blow. Lila's voice cracked. Where's Victoria? They turned. She was gone. The door to the cabin stood open, cold wind rushing in. Jonas's eyes darkened. She took the journal. Daniel swore, grabbing his coat. She's going to bury it. Or burn it. Or worse. No, Lila whispered. She's going to rewrite the ending, before the truth writes it for her. Snow began to fall over Sycamore Lane as Daniel and Lila pulled into the driveway of their childhood home. It looked smaller now, more brittle, more haunted, its shutters trembling in the wind like it knew the ending was near. Inside, the lights were on. Victoria had come home. They found her in the study, seated in Eleanor's worn armchair by the window, the journal open in her lap. Her eyes were red but dry, her expression unreadable. On the desk beside her sat a sealed envelope marked Final Clause, to be opened only in the presence of all children. Jonas entered quietly behind Daniel and Lila, closing the door with reverence. He said nothing. None of them did, not at first. I didn't burn it, Victoria said, her voice surprisingly even. I thought about it, about protecting what little was left of us. But then I read the last page. She looked up at Jonas, her expression softening. She was never trying to punish us, she said. She was preparing us. Daniel stepped forward, wary. Preparing us for what? Victoria slid the envelope toward them. This. With shaking fingers, Lila picked it up and broke the wax seal. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Eleanor's handwriting, fluid and firm. Lila read aloud. If you are reading this, then the truth is no longer buried. I thank you for having the courage to look beneath the surface of our family and yourselves. But there is one final truth you must face together. My death was not natural. Daniel's breath hitched. What? I was being watched. Not by strangers, but by those closest to me. Someone knew I had begun to collect evidence. Someone feared I would expose the past. I fell, yes. But I didn't die from the fall. I died because I was silenced. Lila's voice broke, but she continued reading, her hands trembling. You know who you are, and if you're still reading this, then it's not too late to do the right thing. Silence collapsed into the room like a tidal wave. Cold, crashing, undeniable. She's saying she was murdered, Daniel said numbly. No, Jonas corrected quietly. She's saying she was suffocated. By fear, by betrayal, by the very people she loved. Victoria exhaled sharply. She meant Peter, my ex. He was stealing from her through me. She knew. That's why he ended it. His life and hers. Daniel turned to her, eyes sharp. And you didn't say anything? I didn't know, she snapped. Not until the journal. Not until she wrote it plain. Jonas stepped forward and placed Eleanor's journal gently on the desk. There's more in here. Names, places, evidence she collected. She left it to protect the truth, even if she couldn't protect herself. Lila looked down at the final page again. She didn't want justice through anger. She wanted healing, but she gave us the choice. Daniel paced the room, torn. So what now? We call the authorities? Reopen her death as a possible homicide? Air all our dirty laundry to the world? Victoria shook her head. We do what she asked. We find peace. And how do you propose we do that? Daniel asked bitterly. Because if you think some handwritten confession and a weepy letter makes up for decades of lies, you're wrong. She's not asking us to erase the past, Lila said, standing. She's asking us to face it, Jonas nodded slowly. Maybe peace isn't about forgetting. Maybe it's about finally seeing each other. They stood in silence for a long time. Then, one by one, they moved to the fireplace. Daniel placed the forged documents on the hearth. Victoria added copies of the old will. Lila gently added the original hospital bracelet Eleanor had saved with Jonas's name on it. They didn't burn them. They left them there, exposed, undeniable, like scars no longer hidden. In the end, they didn't seek revenge. They didn't rewrite the truth. They honored it. Eleanor Brant's last word wasn't vengeance. It was choice. And that word broke them. But it also freed them. Epilogue. 3 months later, the Brant home was sold, its proceeds split 4 ways. Jonas bought a quiet farmhouse nearby. Daniel returned to his family and left finance behind. Lila began working at an elder care advocacy center. Victoria, for the first time, walked into therapy and stayed. And on the first day of spring, all 4 siblings gathered at Eleanor's grave, beneath the oak tree she loved. No grand speeches, just silence, and finally, peace.